Okay, everyone, I am so excited to be touching on this topic, really finding our inner voice and getting to know what that is like. I'm excited to have both you, Sonya, and you, Dr. Zach, for this topic. I think I'd love to start off the conversation by passing the mic over to you, Sonya. Maybe you can share with us a little bit about how you've really been able to find your inner voice and what that experience has been like.
Thank you so much. I love this conversation. I feel that it's so important when we're talking about the inner voice it has to do with our throat chakra. It has to do with speaking our truth. The name of my podcast is Speak Your Truth. And what happens is when we're younger, we have these experiences that we go through often where our voice gets shut down, or we're often told you say too much, or you know too much, or don't talk like that, you're a kid and kids aren't supposed to talk like that. Or there's a series of events that we go through, and it kind of sets a precedent. So as adults we stop speaking, or we hold ourselves back. So what does that do to our throat? What does that do to our confidence? So one of the things I specialize in coaching, helping people heal their thyroid, is allowing people to get to know themselves, first of all, get to know your truth. Know thyself is the biggest, most important message that I will say to anyone listening. And speak from a place, because here's the thing, we all have higher knowledge, we all have information, we all have access to so much information. There's so much information out there. But I would start by saying, get to know yourself, get to know your truth, see how you resonate with your own truth, how that vibrates with you. It's almost, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you know this, but when we hear a truth, and a truth that resonates with us deeply in our soul, I usually get holy shivers, where there will be light coming in. That is the truth. There's so many truths, but as far as speaking, it's a golden nugget that I would give is come back to center and speak from your heart. Speak from a place of integrity, and really come back to yourself, because the more you know yourself, the more you can access not only your truth, but higher truth, gnosis, and the more you can operate from this place of integrity. Yeah.
So beautiful. I love everything that you just mentioned. Know thyself. Love that. And Dr. Zach, when you think about this topic, really finding your inner voice and what that experience has been like for you, what comes up?
Well, I want to pick up a little bit what Sonya said about the inner voices as a child. That a lot of the inner voices are coming from our parents, that we told us, don't do this. What are you doing that for? What are you, an idiot? When are you going to grow up? So we constantly play those tapes over and over in our lives, and it just can drive people crazy. I think it's one of the greatest sources of insanity is just people hearing those voices, and they're not in a loving way. They're not soft. They're not gentle. They're harsh. They're very critical. They're disdainful, and especially in this environment where people are sitting at home and why did I lose that job? Am I the one who lost the job, but somebody else is still at the job, or all kinds of scenarios? And, those voices are like a chorus. I mean, they're just screaming at us. So it's so important to get a handle on it. I know for myself, which a lot of us do, because you don't want to keep hearing these voices, that you push them into your subconscious, and they keep talking to us, but we don't hear them. But on a conscious level, but on an unconscious level, we are hearing them, and we respond to them, but we can't have a handle on them because we don't hear them directly, but they affect us. They affect our mood. They affect the thoughts that we have. Just the whole sensation of the quality of our lives. And what's really important is, and this is where meditation comes in, where to do certain meditations where you bring out these voices as opposed to ignoring them, but bring them to your consciousness. Because unless you do, they're going to run your show. They're going to push you in this direction, that direction, and you're not even going to know why is that happening to us. So if you have a meditative process, or at least, why don't we just do that now? Let's stop talking for a second, and let's just get into a meditative posture, and get yourself settled in, and take 3 nice juicy breaths. And now just bring to your consciousness a thought that's been bothering you. You've been feeling it, maybe you've been fully conscious of it, maybe it's under your level of awareness, you've been sort of unconscious about it, but you sort of sense it's out there, but unless somebody like now alerted you to it, you would just ignore it. So just bring that voice, one of the voices. Sometimes people have a whole team of voices that they hear. So just choose one of them if you have multiple voices that talk to you, and just allow that voice to talk to you for a moment. And now if you notice that the voice maybe is a little harsh, it's not talking to you in a loving way, then just gently, in a loving way, tell your voice, can you please, I love hearing what you have to say, but could you say it in a little more loving way? It would help me so much more. So why don't you do that? Have that little dialogue with your voice. And let them continue what they wanted to say to you, but in a more loving way now. And then thank that voice for telling you the things that it wanted to tell you, and by telling you in a much more loving way, and tell them how grateful you are and how much more helpful that'll be if in the future they can talk to you in that more loving way. Okay, if you take 3 more gentle breaths and come back to the program. So how was that? How'd that go?
Beautiful.
So nice. So interesting too, when you can get in touch, because we're giving ourselves that quiet time to really get in tune with which voice, what is it saying. And I love how you change the dialogue that we're having with our internal voice. I love that.
Good.
Amazing. That was so good. I feel so fresh right now, Dr. Zach. Thank you for that.
Sharing my freshness, you know.
Yeah, you're so fresh today. I love it. And it's so interesting. I was reading about a Rumi quote, and if I can recall it properly, Sonya, you'd probably recognize it, where there's a voice that doesn't use words. And for me, it's getting in touch with this inner feeling that is very much like my cheerleader. And my inner cheerleader's always there, but I'm usually that person who doesn't pay it any mind. Like, I ignore it. I grew up as someone who really ignored their truth and tried to be someone that could be well liked and popular and seen as quote unquote successful. So I lived almost like a lie. It wasn't really a lie, but it was a fake persona. And it wasn't until I reached my career in medical sales where I had actually done so well and I felt spiritually bankrupt because I had listened to all the opinions of others, mostly that voice of authority of my father, who really, when I was brought up, I felt like the more successful I could be, then the more loved I would be by him. And he was successful himself. So I tied a lot of success to money. And so I would seek out never my own heart and following my heart in terms of career, but I would seek out the advice of others. What do you think I should do? What do you think I'm good at? What do you think I can make a lot of money with? And growing up in my early 20s, I really, really dug into this ego mind, this small separated sense of us that really told me that my worth was separate than who I was. And my worth was in the success, was in the things that I could accomplish. And the more I could accomplish, the more worthy I'd be. And it's just such a sickening thought when you find yourself in a place where even when you've done so much, it still means nothing. So for me, when it really took place in my life, I hit like a rock bottom. The inner voice is the cheerleader that I heard because I was so self-critical. And I'd be curious if people have experienced this where the personal advisor that you're tuning into is so mean. And my inner voice for a long time was so mean. It was so loud. And it would be that first voice. And I'd listen to it and I'd be like, well, who am I? Oh, my ego says that I am my worth, that I am what I do. Okay, that must be it. And it wasn't until I started to meditate, similar to what you had spoken about, Dr. Zach, where in the quiet moments, you get in touch with this voice, but not necessarily just the voice of the ego. The voice of spirit would come in, and it would come in feelings of comfort. And it would come in whenever I would pray. And it would come in whenever I would surrender thoughts. I'd feel this inner voice that would just say, I've got you. I'm ready for you. It's okay. It's going to be okay. That's like always a mantra. When I think back to some of my darkest days where I was so not in touch, where I was tuning out my inner voice, my emotional state was very depressed. And so anyone who's felt depression, you know, the view forward is scary. It's murky. And I found that it's really when I surrendered my view of what I thought my forward life, what I thought my life should look like, that my inner voice, I got in touch with it and I realized that it was a guide. And it would guide me in small ways. It would guide me to get up and say, you know, look at yourself, look how beautiful you are. And that's why I think, you know, when I talk about finding your inner voice, it's finding your truth. So similar to what Sonya was talking about, speaking your truth, and doing so in a way that is all loving kindness. And that's the voice of spirit. It's a loving, kind voice. And it just took me it took me to the darkest parts of my life to really find that voice. So I think, you know, for you, Sonya, how was that journey for you? Of like, did you always know that this truth was on your heart? Or when you talk about the throat chakra, what might even be some advice you'd offer someone who is feeling like they can't speak their truth?
Thank you. So powerful what you shared. I've struggled with exactly the same things that you were mentioning. I feel that throughout my journey, the voice was of so much criticism, you know, being so harsh on myself. And when you go underneath the layer, and this is what I help my clients to do, is we go underneath the layer, we separate the voices of light, we separate the voices of darkness. We look at what's the message, what are we to learn, whose voice is that? And for me, most of the voices were from my dad. You know, they were my dad's projections, my dad's things that he didn't accomplish, you know, things that he was about were then transferred to me and my brother, my twin brother. And so I feel that, again, to come home to ourselves is to start by loving ourselves, by being kind to ourselves, by taking the small baby steps, by really looking at our small wins. Every day, the small wins, the voices from spirit that always come through to me is, we love you so much. It's always the same thing. We love you so much. Keep going. We love you so much. It's something I truly needed, you know, to understand that we are so protected and cared for regardless of how we are internalizing some of these things, how we are processing these things, even the things that we're here to learn from our parents and the lineage, you know, the things that have been passed on that we have, it's in our DNA, but we can transform it and certain things. And again, in Middle Eastern cultures, in Asian, South Asian cultures, it's the worthiness piece is so huge because, and if you go back, it's fear of it's survival, you know, and that's been passed on. So it's mostly like, you're going to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? That's the classic joke. And if you're not that, you're a loser. And so I have had to personally be so rebellious and my own way and going, no, you know, but again, it's about really taking a step back to go, what is my truth? What am I here to do? What is my soul purpose? How am I here to use this beautiful throat, this beautiful voice box to deliver the message from spirit, right? The angels, from the light. And once we start to follow that, like you said, more pieces will come through, more nuggets of divine light will come through, and the messages get stronger and stronger. We are here, Joy. We are here to speak our truth. And so there's the best, I guess, advice I could give is start. You know, just start anywhere, but start by loving kindness towards yourself. You know, if we're continuously berating ourselves and ourselves up for the small things, the voices that are going to come in they want to be heard, I guess, right? So I'll leave it at that, and I can speak a little bit more on this, but I would say start by affirmations. Yeah.
I love that. So much wisdom there. And for you, Dr. Zach, what comes up for you when you think about this?
Well, again, there was so much wisdom in what Sonya was saying. It was really beautiful. You know, it's what comes up is that we need to sort of sort through where are these voices coming from. So one of the things that's really important is that if it's being harsh, it's not coming from the spirit. Because the spirit, as Sonya was talking about, and Sherry, you were talking, it comes, when it comes from the spirit, it's love. So if you're trying to figure out where is that voice coming from, if it's coming from a place of love, you know, it's not coming from your ego. Your ego is beating you up and separating you and dividing, you know, you from the world, and just coming from fear. And so that's not, now I need to point out that some of those messages are valuable. You know, sometimes we need a little, you know, kick in the rump, you know, to just nudge us along a little bit. Maybe we're not working hard enough sometimes, or we need to stay more focused, and we need to acknowledge that there's always a grain of truth in everything. So let's just not make a big sweep and say, if it's not coming in a loving way, I don't need to think about it. That's a big mistake. And, you know, part of purification, which I've heard all my life, but I never really understood, and it's been recently, is this process of working through your emotional issues that just sit there in our subconscious. And those issues are blocking our ability towards moving towards enlightenment, self-realization. And so all these things that we're talking about all fit into challenges that fit together into an overall picture of how we move forward and rise to a higher level of consciousness. Because that's really what the path we're on. We're on a path of where the human race becomes enlightened. That's the heaven on earth, goodwill to man, you know, peace on earth, all of that. That's the direction we're moving in. So that's the nudging we get sit and meditate, to connect with the spirit, so that we can begin to create our lives so that is rooted in spirit. That's the key. To get out of the false sense of self that the ego is grounding, or not even grounding ourselves, sort of floating ourselves in unreality, but get grounded in spirit so that you can start hearing those voices from a place of love. And what is most challenging to us is the ego voices sometimes can be very loud if you haven't pushed them down. But when either our higher self or universal spirit or God or the source, or however you want to relate to it, quite often, not always, but quite often, that energy, that spirit talks to us in a whisper. So you have to really listen very, very carefully, because the world would be so much different if the spirit just was able to yell at us all the time. You know, hey, let me get your attention. This is spirit now. Let me, just stand up and take note. But unfortunately, that's not what happens. It whispers. So that's why you have to attune yourself. That's why meditation is important, to increase your level of awareness and sensitivity, so you can hear these voices when they come to you. So that's what I wanted to, what came up.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Zach. And it's interesting, as you were sharing that, I was imagining in my mind focus with the thoughts and how these thoughts come in. Sometimes they're loud, sometimes they're that whisper, but where are we focusing? And recently I was watching a man by the name of Stephen Furtick, who has Elevation Church, and it's all online. And he had done a topic like this, and he said, focus is chosen. And I thought it was so powerful, because I think, like, yes, we can be told we have so many different opinions. We've got, the opinions from our parents, the opinions from our friends, the opinions from other people that are maybe doing similar work than us, but it's our opinion of ourselves that matters the most. And I think of this topic of finding our inner voice, there's such a lack of trust there. And I know for me, my experience in the beginning, a couple of years ago, was I didn't really trust myself, to be honest. Like I hated myself. So of course I didn't trust myself, but it was through prayer and meditation where, even though I didn't trust myself, and even though I knew I had this voice that I was focusing on, I still had this spiritual feeling that I was just connected to something so much bigger. And it wasn't really until I really started to not just meditate, but to really cultivate a relationship with God, source, whatever we want to call it. For me, it's God. It's the beautiful energy that created the world, that created my fingertips, that beats my heart, this divine intelligence that's just everywhere. I see that when I worry and when I doubt myself, it's usually because I'm doubting God. And I had to really get clear about that and own it and say, like, this is why I'm so scared. And it wasn't until I owned it that in my prayers even started to change. And my prayers were less about like, God help me. And they changed, and they were like, God, work through me. Let me trust in you, because I can't trust in myself. And I'm listening and I'm tuning into this voice that is so mean, but I know it can't be true. And so for me, once I started to cultivate this relationship and really build my trust in a higher power, the doubt around what I was hearing, my truth, like Sonya was talking about, I wasn't so scared to express it, because I think that's what sometimes happens too. And I think this is where we can go around one last time to talk about, when you go to express your truth, I think that's one of the scariest things for a lot of people, because you are really challenged. And it's a 50-50 shot. You're either going to do it or you're not. And for me, I know when I trust in my own strength, I won't do it. I'll make an excuse. I'll get nervous. I'll get worried, and I'll sit my butt down. But when I say, you know what, I don't have to trust in myself, because I trust in the God that is putting this in front of me. And if I'm here, then it's not just me. Someone out there and energy is going to help me get through it. Once that shift happened for me, that's when I really started to be courageous, because not only was I tapping into my inner voice, I was starting to trust it. And so for you, Sonya, when you really get in touch with your inner voice, how do you trust it? How do you maintain that trust and love for yourself?
That's so beautiful. There were so many nuggets that you had mentioned. And one thing that I want to say is, even in Sufi, the mysticism and the practices, it's placing God before all else. It's really speaking from a place of purity and not fear, right? Because when you venture, you venture off, you're speaking about spiritual awakenings, you're speaking about the angelics, you're now have a podcast, and there's all these opinions, there's so many people that are going to come at you. But again, if you're coming from a place of, you put God before everything, and that's, for me, it's such a place of trust. It's again, healing the relationship with yourself and your creator first. And I think it's still a work in progress, because as a child, I personally have lost my trust. There's things that have happened in my childhood that I'm still working on. There's still trauma there. And we go, well, we have to heal that integral part, that relationship of with the divine, so we can allow that light to work through us and not be in a combat or not be in resistance. And so the more that we focus on the light and the truth, and for me, it's through chanting processes or prayer or meditation, and placing, like I said, God before everything. Even when I speak, right, I allow the divine light to come through, and not my own trauma or not my own insecurities or negativities or projections of things, to allow it to kind of be unveiled, so I can speak from light, if that makes sense. And so again, this is an every moment to moment process, right? We're all seekers, we're all students. And I would say, yeah, it's a very humbling process to always come back to center, to always put our hearts, hand on our heart, bring our spirit back, bring the fragmented pieces back that are missing, come back into our body, and then speak from a place of divine light and truth. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was so beautiful. And I think, just while we have some time, Sonya, any last words that you'd like to offer?
As far as speaking truth, your truth, and
Yeah.
I would say, just, again, it's imperative to heal our relationship with the divine. It's one of the things that I specialize in forgiveness processes. They have shifted so much. I use these with myself. It's not forgetting what happens, but it's letting go. It's letting go of all the things that hold us back. And when we let go of all these pieces that we're carrying, these burdens that we're carrying on our shoulders, it's when we can allow ourselves to be light and allow the flow to come in and operate from a place of joy, operate from a place of nothingness, of not knowing, not having expectations, and just allowing whatever comes, allowing the mystery to happen. And again, there's so many people on the planet, and I was that person who had so many traumas and things that I was carrying that I didn't even know of until I took the deep dive into seeking my own truth and healing my relationship with the divine.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sonya, and for being with us today.
Thank you.
And Dr. Zach, what comes up for you?
Well, a friend of mine called me a couple of days ago. Such a great call. He was in a state of bliss, and so he gave me a prayer, which I'd like to. We can do this. I think this is the most powerful prayer there is, and it's very short. I think we can fit it in. So what I'd like let's do that again. Let's get into a little meditative state again. This will only take a few minutes. So part of this this prayer is to have total belief in the Spirit, in God, and that trust is the basis of this meditation and this prayer. So if you can just take a few breaths, just settle in a bit and feel the Spirit. And as you feel that Spirit, have total trust in that Spirit. Now, I'd like you to imagine something that you would like to see happen. Maybe trust in yourself, the truth that you want to bring out into the world, whatever it is. And just wish that that would happen. And ask God to make that happen. Now allow that prayer and that wish to just be timeless, without any expectation of time. Just having total truth and trust that God and the Spirit will deliver on that. Just sit with that in a state of timeliness and total trust. And when this prayer is over, you'll let it be. You will not need to go back to it because you're trusting in God and in the Spirit to deliver on that prayer. So now take 3 nice juicy breaths, and then you can open your eyes. Is that cool?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So nice. Thank you for that, Dr. Zach. And it's amazing too. Your voice is so soothing. I know you probably get this all the time, and you've got a meditation app out, so I love it. But your voice is so amazing. I truly am just so appreciative of it.
Thanks. It's such a great opportunity to be here with the two of you. This is such a great experience. It just brings out the best in all of us. It's just great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Zach, do you have any last words that you'd like to offer?
Well, as far as voices, again, the meditation, just do your meditation is so important to be in that non-beta wave state. The ego mind flourishes within this state of mind we're in now. And not until we get to a point where we can bring spirit into the moment through our waking day, the best time, and for most people, the only time to do that is when you do meditation or prayer. So it's just so important that people, commit to doing it, because that's where you can connect with spirit and magic can happen in your life. I mean, the 3 of us all know that. Where would we be if we weren't connected with spirit, right? Nowhere, right? We'd be like nut jobs.
Yes, amazing. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Zach. It's so true. I think of who would I be without my spirit? I'd probably be wild, because for me, spirit has been such a guide, and for someone and anyone that's watching this that has experienced anxiety, a lot of it comes from just thinking about the future and knowing that I have no control there. But in a split second, I remember God is there. God's everywhere. Like, where is there a place that God is not? So if I can, like Sonya, what you had mentioned, where I love just making God, everything. I think that's really what has allowed me to not just hear my inner voice, but to love my inner voice. Even when my inner voice is like, and I feel it on my heart where I think I really want to do something, but my heart knows, Sherry, that's not, no. And that has sometimes been scary for me, because I live a lot of times in my intellect, and my intellect will worry and it'll rationalize, and it's my left hemisphere of my brain, and it's very analytical. And in any environment like where we are now with the quarantine, it gets a little tough to shift into the right side of our brain and want to be creative and want to serve. But it comes back to this place of focus, and where are we going to choose to focus? Because the inner voice is always there. We just drown it out with the opinions of other people. And so if we can remember that it's not that we don't have an inner voice, it's not that we're, meant to live in our head the whole time, that we're alive, but it's up to us to build that relationship with our inner voice and to take it moment by moment. I think, Sonya, you had mentioned that, where it is a moment by moment process. Yeah, I could wake up and have my practice all done, and then maybe later on in the day, something happens and I'm questioning things again. But what's so beautiful about when you find your inner voice, it's like your personal advisor all the time, a personal that you always have. And I think the hardest part that I have really had to get through is hearing the inner voice. And what I mean by that is I pray so much, sometimes I wouldn't give myself any quiet time to really receive any guidance. And so for me, and this will be my last thing, is similar to how we put out that prayer and how so many of us pray, but really allowing ourselves that time to meditate, to receive the info and receive the wisdom and receive all the answers. That's really where I get to know my inner voice the most. And that's where I've been able to really see all the sides of myself that don't trust that part of me and that don't love that part of me. And so for anyone that's watching this, you might find where you go to meditate and your ego is like, you suck at meditating. You can't do this. Don't do this. You should be better by now. You should be farther along by now. Whatever type of thought comes in, the last words that I would mention is that the inner voice and trusting and finding that inner voice, to me, is central for life. Because when we don't come home, like you were talking about, Sonya, when we don't come home, we're living so far away from ourselves. We'll constantly feel that sense of emptiness. We'll constantly feel that sense of anxiety, because there'll always be this what if, and there'll be no spirit. There'll be no recognition of certainty there. And that can be so scary. So for that person that's really starting their spiritual practice and getting to know this voice, listen to Dr. Zach when he talks about meditating. And Dr. Zach's got freaking so many meditations, which I love, which are going to help you hear the inner voice. And then with Sonya, what I love with what you do is you help people forgive that journey. We are the ones who are like, no, I won't forgive myself. We hold on to so much shame and guilt. And I would just say that we're not alone with that, and that there are people like Sonya who have this beautiful practice of helping other people, helping you really get in touch with a lot of this emotion, a lot of this noise. And really, you can have support with deciphering it. Like I would recommend, anyone that's like, I can't find my voice, I'm struggling, and you're listening so much to that ego, just know there are people here that want to support you. There is, there's nothing to be ashamed of, as much as that ego says, don't reach out to her. She's going to think of, what is she going to think? It's really just letting go, like you had mentioned, Sonya, and that form of acceptance. getting to this place where we can accept that we have this inner voice. And now it's up to us to choose whether or not we want to focus on it. So it was so nice to connect with you both. Anything that you two would like to add before I let us go?
I would like to say for people who are listening, look up the Cherokee story about the two wolves. That would be a really good little nugget that I want to leave all the listeners with, and really just pay attention to the narrative and the message in this beautiful native story. It's about the two wolves, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
I love that. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you both for joining us today. This was such a phenomenal panel.
It was.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much. Good to see you.